This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Former Congressman Joe Walsh here. So there's a group I've recently found and become a really big fan of called Starts With Us. They're a movement working to overcome the extreme political and cultural divisions in our country. Find them online at startswith.us/white flag. What I love about them is they're showing people how it's possible to have real, meaningful, productive conversations with people you disagree with. I'm such a big fan of this. This is what I've been trying to do with my podcast. Look, here's the deal right now. In America, we have two major political parties that are at each other's throats. And the most dangerous aspect of this is that way too many of us are avoiding having the hard conversations with people with whom we disagree. We're afraid to have these conversations, so we walk away. But to save our democracy, we have to stick around. I mean, if we're walking away from the table, then who the hell is sticking around to figure things out? This is what I so love and admire about the work that Starts With Us is doing. They are the movement of people like you and me who want to fight the extreme divisions in our country. Because guess what? We actually are in the majority. Starts With Us found that 87% of Americans are tired of how politically and culturally divided we are. So I'm not just a fan, I'm part of the movement. And if you're listening, I want you to join the movement too. Get involved. Go to startswith.us/white flag and sign up for their newsletter. Start there. Again, that's startswith.us/white flag. A huge fan, by the way, of my guest today, former Congressman Joe Walsh, back with you. White Flag with Joe Walsh. Every week I sit down with people who don't think like me. I've been such a huge fan of my guest Norm Ornstein for so long, from afar for so long. Long-time American political scientist. He is currently the emeritus scholar at a great outfit, the American Enterprise Institute. Be sure to follow Norm on Twitter as well, at Norm Ornstein. Norm, I wanted to have you on today to discuss something timely and something very specific. It was announced last week or a week or two ago that CNN was going to host a town hall with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. When this was announced, a number of people, chimed in immediately on social media, yay or nay. You gave a very enthusiastic, no, bad idea, which I disagree with, but I so wanted to get you on because I wanted to hear your perspective on this. I'm going to start, Norm, broadly with the big broad question, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Yeah.
Should CNN be hosting a town hall with Donald Trump? What say you?
I don't like the idea, Joe, and here's why. There are a couple of reasons. It's also why I wouldn't like the idea of CNN or anybody else hosting a town hall with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Or with other candidates who promote conspiracy theories. In the case of a Kennedy, in the case of at least one of the Republican announced candidates, they're not going to win nominations. But the idea that you are going to host people like this on a major television network, by definition, gives them legitimacy. And that, in the process, can give those views legitimacy. It gives them traction to be able to promote ideas that are destructive, dangerous, false, often flat out lies,
Yeah.
even if they're countered in some fashion.
Yeah.
Now, Trump obviously is in a different category. He is, I think, by every reasonable standard, the front runner for the Republican nomination in 2024. Polls show actually that Republicans basically would favor candidates who deny the 2020 election. The drawbacks that he has don't seem to faze them. In fact, if anything, they're adding to his support. So that's CNN's rationale, of course, and CNN's idea as it tries to rebrand itself is we're a news network. We put on all different points of view. We will be respectful of people. We will let viewers judge. But in this case, there are two things that deeply trouble me. The first is, it's one thing if Donald Trump appears on One America Network or Newsmax or RT, where I think he would actually be quite comfortable, or his new nemesis, Fox. When you appear on a CNN or an MSNBC to a larger group of voters than that Republican base, which is happy with an election denier and would be unhappy with somebody who said, no, the election was not stolen, you're adding a very heavy patina of legitimacy. The second is what we're dealing with Trump is something unique in the history of the presidency. We have never had a president, one, as corrupt as Donald Trump, two, under indictment, three, facing many additional charges, including potentially very troubling charges about his relationship with the Saudis and classified documents. But some of those charges are going to involve inciting a violent insurrection to overturn the results of an election. Whether he's the front runner for a party nomination or not, you're basically saying, hey, we have to put those things to the side. Now, I can go beyond that, and I would add.
No, stop. That's a great start. And I was trying to think of the argument you were going to frame, and this makes a lot of sense. I disagree completely, but I understand exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate the distinction you make between Trump and RFK and candidates that cannot win. I think Trump will be the nominee. And again, so everybody listening to Norm and I right now needs to understand that Norm and I view Donald Trump exactly the same. He's an existential threat to our democracy, period. But having said all that, Norm, my biggest take is, and again, how I feel about Trump, he is going to be the nominee. He's the front runner. He's the leader of one of America's two major political parties. As despicable, as dishonest, as traitorous as he is, he's still the leader of the Republican Party. I think CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS are obligated then to put him on, to air him in debates or town halls. Because, look, it's the reality. He's the leader of that party who will probably be the nominee.
So I would put it another way, Joe, which is, let's say he wins the nomination. And I agree with you. He is the likeliest, I think, by far. Now, a lot can happen, including many more trials, and potentially he'd have to do it from jail, potentially. But once he wins a nomination, then I have a different perspective.
Okay.
Then you have to air his views. You have to try and subject him to some significant questions. You have to hope that there will be actually presidential debates, but he's not the nominee.
Why is that? Let me stop you, Norm. Let me stop you. That's interesting. Drill down on that. Why is that line that you've drawn important once he becomes the nominee? I mean, there are going to be fights for the nomination, certainly a fight for the Republican Party nomination. So Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, if he gets in, all of these candidates deserve time as they all try to seek the nomination. What makes that line kind of a demarcation for you?
So I would argue that right now, he's not even a declared candidate. He is a public figure, but he is a public figure who has stained American democracy. And until he is at a point where he actually is a potential president for a second term, I treat him as a pariah. Not only that, giving him this time could enhance his chances of winning a nomination. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, for Trump, this invitation from CNN at this point is a godsend. He gets an opportunity. Most of the questions are likely to be softball questions. The questions from the audience are going to be ones he can deal with or bat aside. Whether Caitlin Collins will provide something different, we will see. But what we also know with Trump is if he gets through this relatively unscathed, or if he gets through it because a few people in the crowd lob really hostile questions at him, he's a winner. If he has trouble with it, he can go out and blame CNN. Of course, they, got me into this and then they sandbagged me. They promised me X and then it turned out to be Y. So it's a win-win for Trump. And at this stage, a grifter who has basically cheated taxpayers out of many millions, who violated the Constitution over and over with emoluments clauses, who almost sold our country out to Russia and did to Saudi Arabia, who encouraged a violent insurrection, who, if the Proud Boys are guilty of seditious conspiracy, I would argue we're not that far from Trump. To give him the legitimacy now, before he has earned that nomination, I'm against it.
That's Norm, that's fascinating. Point of clarification, he is a declared candidate, correct?
Okay. I guess he is. He's officially declared. Now he's raising money. Yes.
Yeah. So he's officially a declared candidate. He's the, and again, I'll repeat myself continually. Every single word Norm Ornstein just said about Donald Trump, the man, the person, the president, I agree with. He is a declared candidate. He's the clear front runner. You mentioned, Norm, that this is a win-win for him, and it probably is. But to me, it's like not CNN's job to put their thumb on the scales and to either purposely try to help or hurt Trump. I have a former president who's the leader of one of America's two major political parties. He's running for president again. He's the overwhelming favorite. Of course, I have to give him an audience. Like, Norm, I don't even think, that's why I so value what you're saying, because I don't even think this is a close call.
Well, I do not think it's a close call either. You're not putting the thumb on the scales if you say we are not giving Donald Trump free primetime airtime. I mean, frankly, I'm not at all sure that we need to have town halls with all presidential candidates now. It's very early in this game. You want to do interviews with some of them, that's fine. As I said, I really do not like the idea of giving interviews airtime legitimacy to fringe candidates or conspiracy theorists. But at the same time, what do we get out of a town hall with Donald Trump that we don't already know about?
And I respond, Norm, by saying that I agree this sucks. It's the lay of the land in that he's still there. I wish he wasn't still there. But because he's still there, we have to deal with him. It reminds me of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Norm. I would argue that she's the most powerful Republican in Washington, which scares the hell out of me because she's as despicable as Donald Trump. But yet 60 Minutes did an interview with her. And I mean, I have no problem with the media covering Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is what we have right now. And so this is where my former party is. Media, deal with it.
I did election analysis with CBS News for 30 years. I know Leslie Stahl and worked with her over decades. Yeah. She is, one of the great veteran journalists. I was just infuriated by that 60 Minutes interview.
Were you infuriated, Norm, that she had it to begin with, or how she conducted herself?
I was infuriated that she had it because here again, when you're on a 60 Minutes, you are legitimized. Yes, she is a figure of power in the House. She's not a formal figure of power. She's not the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader of the House. She is a powerful figure. Yes, she's a powerful figure spouting lies, vile, racism, all kinds of other terrible things. 60 Minutes is one of the prime platforms. You could have all kinds of people who get interviewed. When you do that, you are, first, by definition, once again, conferring legitimacy. Just because she occupies an elective office does not make her legitimate. But secondly, that interview was a softball pancake interview.
I agree with that.
Beneath Leslie Stahl and 60 Minutes. There was no pushback on some of the vile things that she said. There was no context provided other than, she's a controversial figure.
Yeah.
Yes. She was thrilled with that interview, which tells you everything you need to know. And if you are a media powerhouse, 60 Minutes is a media powerhouse, as is CBS. CNN is a media powerhouse. It's not just about providing venues, which means free airtime for everybody who is in the news, because you're not doing it for everybody who's in the news. You are being selective no matter what. And both of those I found really troubling. And I will tell you also, Joe, that when I see some of these vile figures who appear on Sunday talk shows, it's the same thing. And of course, what ends up happening, and that's what makes this so much worse, is we have a media, as a general matter, that refuses to make bad actors accountable.
Agreed.
They are so consumed with both sidesism, with false equivalence.
Agreed.
That voters, including those who just don't pay a whole lot of attention, but many who do pay some attention, think, well, everybody's to blame. And that means there is no accountability, and that's what has gotten us into this terrible mess that we're in now. And I don't want to make it worse.
It's interesting, Norm. You keep referring to this theme that CNN would legitimize him. Leslie Stahl in CBS News 60 Minutes legitimized Marjorie Taylor Greene. My response to that would be, sadly, Trump's already legitimized. He's a former president. He's already out there, baby. He is the Republican Party. I think by ignoring him, if Ron DeSantis announces in a week or two, and CNN wouldn't hesitate to have a town hall with Ron DeSantis. Same with Mike Pence. They've had a town hall with Pence. They've had a town hall with Biden. To not include the front runner of the Republican Party, as despicable as he is, to me would be the media, CNN, putting their thumb on the scales. And I actually think, Norm, by ignoring Trump, I think that would strengthen him.
I disagree. He's not strengthened. If he, in fact, would be maddened if people ignored him, of course. Now, I'll give you a caveat here. Let's say that CNN started its town hall with a well-produced 15-minute video that went in detail into everything Trump has done and said, bilking taxpayers by charging Secret Service outrageous rates for their rooms, for the golf carts that they were using to protect him, violating the emoluments clauses over and over again, enriching his own family, covering up the brutal murder of an American and Saudi Arabian journalist to protect MBS, and then taking tons of money from the Saudis, $2 billion to his son-in-law. COVID, basically enabling hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths. Then we can get into the rapes. We can get into the charges of a business corporation that violated multiple laws, including tax laws. We can get into the documents, get into the violent insurrection. Do that. Frame that as the way to start a town hall, and I'd have a different point of view. They will not.
Yeah, we will not hear that. Norman, I mean this respectfully, and I'll ask myself the same question. I want to ask you, Norm Ornstein, what are you afraid of by having a Trump town hall? And I ask that question to myself. What am I afraid of if CNN doesn't give Trump a town hall? I'm afraid that it will enhance his anti-establishment creed, and it will embolden him with a lot of non-political people out there who believe it's unfair. I think it's wrong for CNN not to have a town hall, but I'm afraid if they don't, it would strengthen him. What are you afraid of when it comes to CNN doing this?
So we know that a third, maybe more, of Republican voters are going to be with Donald Trump no matter what.
Yeah.
It is absolutely the case that if he not just shot somebody in broad daylight on Fifth Avenue, if Donald Trump took an AR-15 and mowed down 20 people at an outlet mall, they'd still support him. We know that you've got another very solid share of Republican voters who are going to vote for the nominee no matter what. And frankly, when I see Republicans like Mike Pence, Trump tried to kill him, basically saying, well, if he's the nominee, okay, put those voters aside. Now let's look at other groups of voters. Suburban Republicans who are Republican, want to support their party, but are not sure at this point. And voters who just don't pay as much attention to what's going on. If we don't treat Donald Trump as sui generis, as a president unlike any other, as a political figure unlike any other, some of those voters are going to come away from this saying, hey, he was not only was he president, CNN treats him just like they do any other candidate or any other president. Then
that's interesting, Norm. That's really interesting, Norm. I like the way you said that. And I agree with that, in that the media cannot treat him like any other candidate for president. He's the only sitting president in American history who lost an election and refused to participate in the peaceful transfer of power. He did incite and led an insurrection to violently overthrow an American election. I agree with your premise that he should not be treated the same. I guess where you and I disagree is I don't believe then that means we don't cover him. I think he has to be covered because of where we are and where he is. But you certainly don't cover him the same. As you say, Norm, when you have him on, damn it, you ask him about January 6th. You ask him about the classified documents. I think that's how we treat him differently, but it's not that we ignore him. We can't do that. I would argue we shouldn't, but we can't.
Well, we'll see how this town hall goes.
Yeah.
And I am highly skeptical that it is going to be the tough going over that he deserves. There may be some tough questions. Caitlin Collins might ask a few of those. Some in the audience might ask a few of those. He might stain and embarrass himself with some of the answers, but they're going to balance it. And that's what CNN is all about now, is balance. And in that balance, they're going to leave a lot of voters in a position where they're going to think less badly of him than they should. And that's, I'm hoping I'm wrong.
Hey, Norm, part of me wants to slap you upside the head because I want to slap the American voter upside the head.
Yeah.
It's the American voter needs to be, damn it, they need to be discerning, and they need to understand who and what Trump is. That's not CNN's job. CNN puts him out there. It's up to the American voter to see who he is, no?
You know, this is a part of a theory of journalism, and television journalism especially. And Chris Lick, the president of CNN, said this in the profile of him, that I have long objected to. And it is that we treat the American public as a jury, and we treat dialogue as, well, there's going to be a case for the prosecution and a case for the defense, and the jury will listen to both and then they'll decide. But it doesn't work that way. That's not how voters look at things. And it creates, again, this false equivalence. So every time you see one of these talk shows that puts on a Republican strategist and a Democratic strategist, you don't get closer to the truth. When we had discussions of climate change, you'd have a climate denier and a scientist who said this is real. And what the American people came away with thinking was, well, it's probably divided 50-50. Half the scientists think it's not really man-made, others do. And it's a false reality that's being created. And in this case, I really, it would be wonderful, Joe. You and I would get the best bottle of champagne if American voters on the whole were discerning. Most people don't pay a huge amount of attention. They filter it through their own biases. You know, I just noticed there's a new YouGov poll about what media people trust.
Yeah, I saw that.
If you saw it, Democrats were more favorable towards the Daily Caller, the New York Post, than Republicans. Does that actually reflect a reality? Of course it doesn't. Most likely, other than the possibility that a YouGov poll, which is an internet poll, but let's assume it's an accurate poll. You're talking about people who have no idea what the New York Post is. They see New York newspaper, National Review. Well, of course, we like something that's national. We think it's a great review. So that's where people are. Most people don't pay a lot of attention to politics because they're living their daily lives.
Yeah.
Others are going to react viscerally because of their culture or, tribalism, whatever it might be. Media have a responsibility beyond just putting somebody out there and saying, listen to them and then evaluate. And that responsibility, because there's a limited amount of airtime, there are limited choices being made. You make those choices, and I don't like this choice.
I think the media has I think the media has a responsibility to cover the leader of the Republican Party. Norm, so interesting though, if and when he becomes the formal nominee, at that point, okay, you got to cover him.
Yeah, and now let me reframe it, Joe. Covering him is one thing. Showcasing him is another. Do you cover Trump?
What is a town hall?
That's showcasing. Okay. Go back to 2016. Every one of Trump's rallies, practically speaking, was covered top to bottom by cable news networks because it got ratings. Okay, that wasn't covering anything. That was showcasing. You were taking something unfiltered and letting people see it, but giving an enormous amount of time and attention to somebody. It had a lot to do with them winning the nomination because they weren't giving that time and attention to any other town halls.
So drill down on this, Norm. Drill down on this notion of showcasing, because I have no problem with whatever the format is, but a town hall clearly would be showcasing Trump in your opinion. What is it about a town hall as opposed to just a one-on-one interview for an hour with Jake Tapper or a debate? Is there something unique about a town hall that you think is more of a showcase?
Of course, part of it depends on what kind of town hall.
Yeah.
But if you get a town hall,
these will be Republican primary voters and some independents.
Right. You get a town hall that includes people who are predisposed to him. And most of the questions that they ask are going to be either softball questions or questions that are right in his wheelhouse. Not anything that makes him sweat or makes him feel differently. Plus, while many of the questions that I've seen in town halls from citizens can be better than the questions from journalists because they reflect people's real lives, I don't expect that here. Then you've got a moderator, and the moderator is not going to want to have a town hall that descends into a pissing match between the individual and the interviewer. So, will Caitlin Collins ask some tough questions? I expect she will. Will she really press Donald Trump? I will be pleasantly surprised if that turns out to be the case. But the whole idea here and the whole theory of CNN is that you're not going to show a bias. Okay? How do you not show a bias when you're dealing with a violent insurrectionist?
Well, okay, I'll answer that. You don't show a bias by having him on your network. And then, as you said, Norm, you go after him with the real hard questions, the tough questions, right at him. That's how you don't have a bias. But if you don't give him a platform, you're showing a bias. But yeah, you go after him.
We'll see how much they go after him. But what we know, Joe, is if they really do go after him, Donald Trump is going to come out of it and say, see, I was sandbagged by the liberal media again, and he will gain from that. And they're not going to go after him hammer and tong, because that's not what the new CNN is about.
I agree, and I believe CNN has a big responsibility here to go at him with the real hard questions. I don't know that they will either. Norm, is an interview, if he was going to sit there for just a 45-minute interview with just Caitlin Collins, would you feel better about this?
That, again, would depend on what questions Caitlin Collins would ask.
Yeah.
You know, if this were a 45-minute interview with John Harwood, yes. Maybe with Jake Tapper. But I'm just not sure that anybody else associated with the network now is going to do that. And again, they're not going to do it because there's a different frame in CNN now. This is a reaction against what they saw as the previous regime, which actually I think was kind of wrong-headed for a long time. The Jeff Zucker regime going through 2016 was the Trump television network.
Right.
We had all of these scenes of waiting with an empty podium for him to show up. They brought in a ready succession of Trump lickspittles like Jeffrey Lord and Corey Lewandowski and paid them huge sums of money to defend Trump. Now, did they then turn on Trump? Were there plenty of people who went after him hard? Yes. Now they want to show that's not who they are. So maybe it would be different. Caitlin Collins right now is auditioning for a primetime spot, I would say. Now, at one level, she wants to show that she's not the conservative force that she was before she came to CNN. But at another level, if she goes too hard, then she's not fitting their new frame or image. So I'm a skeptic at this point. I hope I'm proven wrong.
Well, I think it's good to be a skeptic, Norm, and I really do appreciate your honest take because, look, and I'm not pointed toward you, but a lot of voices from the left, when this news first came out, their gut reaction was just disgust. You can't do that. And I heard very few reasoned arguments against it. You present a reasoned argument. But I keep coming back to this. It just strikes me that this is where we are. And a lot of people in America on the left rightly don't like Trump for good reason. I don't. And so we can't give him any exposure because CNN shouldn't give him exposure because we don't like him. I agree with you, Norm, that he's a uniquely un-American, anti-democratic a person in this country. He's an existential threat to this country. I just believe the answer to dealing with him, go ahead and give him a microphone, but then expose him instead of not giving him a microphone. I just don't think we've only got two political parties, Norm. He's the leader of one of them.
And I wish, Joe, that the mainstream media would begin to treat one of those two political parties with frank honesty.
Yes.
Which has not happened.
What? So
still treating it, they're still legitimizing the illegitimate, normalizing the abnormal. And, we'll circle back, Joe, after the town hall to see if your hope is fulfilled.
I have a feeling what will happen will fall much more along the lines of what you're expecting to have happen. Two final questions on this, Norm. My former political party, a fully radicalized Trumpist political party now, a political party of election deniers, authoritarian embracers, and just cruel bullies. But Meet the Press and Face the Nation and George Stephanopoulos Sunday mornings, I mean, you've got to have Republican senators or members of the House on these shows. Do you or don't you? What do we do, Norm, with how does the media handle my former political party?
I grant you that it's a dilemma. Take a guy like Jim Comer.
Yeah.
He is the chair of a major committee. Do you say you're not going to have him on, even though what he's doing is often spouting lies or moving in sordid directions? That's a different call. If you are a Sunday show and you've got a major investigation that's about to go underway, you need to deal with it. But you also need to deal with it honestly. And when you get, and this is, as big a problem as any that I have with the Sunday shows is they will have somebody on who says something that's either false or deeply misleading, and they'll let it go and move on to the next question. And, you look at what's happened recently with Comer and Chuck Grassley out there basically claiming that there was evidence that Joe Biden had committed serious crimes as a vice president.
And they presented no evidence.
Zero evidence. And then finally, Chuck Grassley said, well, we don't know if it's true or not true. But this was after he'd spouted it.
Yeah.
Did anybody say to him, how irresponsible is it to slime a president without evidence? No, they didn't. They gave a showcase for this stuff. That's what you don't do if you are a network or a Sunday show.
Two final quickies, Norm. I've always been of the school of thought that every ugly, bigoted, dangerous, traitorous thing Trump says and does, you put out there as much as you can, because I want the American people to see every ugly, bigoted, dangerous, cruel thing he says. Are you in that camp, or do you believe he gets too much exposure and his ugliness and bigotry and authoritarianism needs to be ignored.
So if you do that by, as they did in 2016 and to a significant degree in 2020, putting him on unfiltered, putting on a rally and showing the rally. And then maybe afterwards, after the audience has disappeared, doing a little analysis of it. But of course, the analysis that they do of it as a Trump apologist, along with an anti-Trump person, that you don't do. Now, do you air what he says and then talk about it? Yeah, but you don't do it unfiltered.
Last
of
question.
course, you can't ignore it when he's out there and he has his own communications venues, but you have to contextualize it, and that is often what is missing.
Agreed. Last question, Norm. The media question. Fox, forget about Fox. They are what they are. MSNBC, and I go on MSNBC plenty. It's a left of center network. They have their bias. I'll ask a naive question, Norm. What's wrong with CNN? And I go on CNN a bunch too. What's wrong with CNN trying to present a balanced, down the road, centrist kind of viewpoint?
I agree, first of all, that CNN needed to change its approach. It needed to find its core and its core values again. I would love to have not a centrist organization, a straightforward news organization. Yeah. I would love to have a network that doesn't decide that the way you analyze things is that you bring on a balanced panel that has to include a Trump person as well as an anti-Trump person, a Democrat as well as a Republican. Bring in honest analysts. And you don't have to do it with panels of 6 people or 8 people. There are better ways to deal with that. Do straightforward, honest news, understanding that your ratings may not be reflective. But, if I look at models, to me, BBC News is a model. When I listen, as I do often in the mornings, to the BBC World News, which is on PBS, or on, NPR, I think it is deep analysis, pretty straightforward news. The News Hour on PBS isn't perfect, but it's a reasonably good approximation. But that's not enough. And if CNN can find that sweet spot and be the place that it was for so long, where whenever a breaking news story happens, that's where you want to turn, then more power to them. I'd be all for that. I'm not sure they're going in the right direction with what they're doing right now.
And to close, Norm, I agree with most of that. You and I would disagree in that I think it's important to put the MAGA Trumper voices on, the senators, the commentators, the thought leaders. And in my world, you put them on, but then you go after them on these networks. Norm Ornstein, everybody, one of our country's best. Please follow him on Twitter. Everything he writes, reads, one of our longtime best American political scientists. Norm, this episode is airing Wednesday morning, so the town hall will be tonight. If I wouldn't bet you, because if I had $10, I think you're going to end up being proven right, sadly. Thank you, my friend.
You bet, Joe. Great to talk to you.
Thanks.
As always.
Joe Walsh here, governmentauction.com. It's a live auction site where you bid against other people interested in land, jewelry, coins, all kinds of collectibles, even Rolex watches. Have you ever wanted a 40-acre plot of land in Texas or Wyoming? Governmentauction.com has it. If you're the winning bidder, You don't need to go through credit checks. You just make a few down payments, keep your monthly payments going for a few years, and the land is yours. While you're making payments, you can use the land just like you would if you owned it. I know I've always wanted a big piece of land where I could go and just hang out, hunt, or hang with my dogs. And it's easy to sign up and start bidding on something that catches your eye. Go to governmentauction.com. It takes less than 5 minutes. Governmentauction.com.